The Detroit Regional Chamber's MPC20 Conversations Respond and Rebuild digital series is provided in partnership with Detroit Public Television and presented by Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan, with additional support from Accenture, Bank of America, Barton Malow, Comerica Bank, Consumers Energy, Delta Dental, Dow, DTE Energy, Enbridge Energy, Ford Motor Company, Huntington Bank, ITC, KPMG, the Kresge Foundation, Kroger, Michigan Economic Development Corporation, PNC Bank, Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation, Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans, the Skillman Foundation, and TCF Bank. And by these supporters. Support for Detroit Public TV's coverage is provided by DTE Energy Foundation and Masco.
Make today a new you had it in you day. Make today a we need a bigger trophy case day. Make today a learning the basics day. Make today a finally going in on season tickets day. No matter the day, PNC has the financial tools and technology to help. PNC Bank. Make today the day.
We're here for it all. Day 1 to year 100. The times you remember and things you'd rather leave behind. Standing by for the late nights, the midday surprises, and everything in between. We're here for it all, and always will be. Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan. Confidence comes with every card.
Welcome to MPC20 Conversations. I'm Dan Loepp, President and CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan. And we're pleased, and I'm pleased to have a discussion today with the Governor of the state of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer. I'd like to acknowledge the hard work that the Chamber did. You know, usually we start this on Mackinac Island, but some tough decisions were made. I want to acknowledge Patty Poppy, who was the chair of the Chamber Board this year, Ryan Maybach, who was the chair of the policy conference, Sandy, and his team, and the Chamber leaders, and of course, DPTV. There were some tough decisions made, and I give the team at the Chamber a lot of credit. They took a tough hit here, but they made the right decision. And of course, I'm proud to be a member of the Chamber. I've had the honor of serving as chair of the Chamber Board and the Mackinac Island conference a while ago. But this was a tough decision, and I give you all a great deal of credit. It was the right thing to do, and hopefully we'll be together next year on the island. I'm really excited about today's conversation and our conversation with the Governor of the state of Michigan, Governor Whitmer. The Governor and I have known each other a while. We've worked on a lot of projects over the years, and the one thing I do know, what a great leader. As I travel the country and talk to my colleagues around the Blue Cross world, they always ask me about how's your governor doing. And I think people, both here in Michigan and across the nation, have been very proud of the work that she's done. The governor has shown courage, I think, tackling these issues with fervor, allowing, I think, as she says, letting the science and the data really direct her in making the decisions that she's made. And being a resident of Michigan, a spouse, a grandparent, and a parent, I'm glad that I'm here in Michigan because great decisions have been made. When you look at the statistics, especially in the last 90 days, Michigan is in the top of stopping and flattening that curve. And we can't even count the thousands of people that haven't got COVID based on what she's done here as the leader of the state of Michigan, and the hundreds and if not thousands of lives that have been saved. And as we think back to March and the tough decisions were made, I think what it did do is really helped out those first responders. You know, back then we didn't know much about COVID. And the fact that she stood up and said, listen, we've got to be tough. Let's get masks on. Let's socially distant. Let's close things down for a little bit so that we can get our arms around this. And I think she did just that. And so it is a great pleasure to be here today to have the conversation. And it's my pleasure to introduce the 49th Governor of the state of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer. Governor.
Thank you. I want to thank Dan Loepp. I want to thank the team at the Detroit Chamber and Blue Cross Blue Shield and Detroit Public Television for helping make this virtual event a reality. I know this year's event looks a lot different than last year's. This year, we've had to confront challenges unlike anything we've ever seen. The COVID-19 pandemic has devastated families and sidelined workers and businesses. It's required that we completely change the way that we live and work. But throughout this crisis, Michiganders and businesses have stepped up to do their part to protect one another. Blue Cross Blue Shield, for example, announced with a number of other insurance companies that they would waive cost sharing for COVID-19 testing and cover the use of virtual care and telemedicine. Businesses across our state retooled their machinery so that they could produce hand sanitizer and face masks and more. In August, we announced a partnership with Ford and FEMA to donate 4 million face masks to Michiganders who need them most, called the My Mask Aid program. And last week, GM announced that they will donate 2 million face masks to Michigan public schools as a part of the state partnership, and masks that are designed for kids. And Dow Chemical worked to produce hand sanitizer, other PPE, and is helping to provide testing for more Michiganders. Our frontline workers have put their lives on the line every day to protect us and to protect our families from this virus. Nurses who are working 18-hour shifts at our hospitals, healthcare professionals administering COVID tests at site all across our state, grocery store employees working overtime just to keep the shelves stocked. These are just a few examples of the dedicated people who have made it possible for the rest of us to stay home and stay safe over the past 6 months. That's what Michigan is all about. We're tough, we're innovative, and we take care of each other. And long after we beat this virus, we will remember all of the people who stepped up and worked around the clock to keep us safe. That's what the Futures for Frontliners program is all about. I announced Futures for Frontliners in April. It's a program that's inspired by the GI Bill after World War II. Historically, when Americans put their lives on the line to defend the rest of us from an enemy, we have shown our gratitude by providing them with educational opportunities to improve their lives. The frontline workers here in Michigan have been putting their lives on the line to protect us from a new enemy, COVID-19. This includes those working in our hospitals and nursing homes, grocery store workers ensuring we can put food on our table, child care workers providing care, working manufacturers who are making PPE, and those providing public safety or picking up trash or delivering supplies. They all deserve our thanks and our support. The Futures for Frontliners plan will help ensure these heroes have paths to opportunity once this crisis is over. It'll provide tuition-free college opportunities for people who've risked their lives fighting on the front lines of this pandemic. It'll help more workers acquire technical certificates, associate degrees, and at our community colleges, and potentially bachelor's degrees at our universities after this crisis is over. We're the first in the nation to do something like this, and I'm hopeful other governors and states will follow our lead to create more pathways to opportunity for people who have continued to stay on the front lines to protect our families. At last year's policy conference, I spoke about my administration's goal to reach 60% of Michiganders with a post-secondary degree by 2030. That goal has not changed. Right now, the vast majority of jobs in Michigan require some form of post-secondary degree or certificate. But as of 2016, only 45% of our adults have that credential. We all know that closing the skills gap will be good for our state. Reaching 60% of our state with a post-secondary degree will help more families thrive and grow our economy. The Futures for Frontliners program will help us get one step closer toward that goal. Later this week, I'll have more to say on this topic and how our frontline workers can sign up. We're excited to get this off the ground and for more Michiganders to find opportunity in this program. We're also working hard to help small business owners get back on their feet. Now, while businesses are reopening, the impacts of COVID-19 are still creating incredibly difficult situations for small businesses across Michigan, from lost business and revenue to increased costs associated with providing adequate safety measures for employees and customers. And that's why I signed into law a bipartisan supplemental budget that directed $100 million of federal CARES Act funding to the Michigan Strategic Fund to implement the Michigan Small Business Restart Program. These grants of up to $20,000 each will support Michigan small businesses and nonprofits that are reopening and have experienced a loss of income as a result of the COVID crisis. 30% of all these grants will be awarded under the Restart Program and will be going to minority-owned, women-owned, and veteran-owned businesses. And just last week, Sandy Pierce joined me by announcing this incredible Huntington Bank commitment of $5 billion to provide crucial support for Michigan small businesses, consumers, and communities. There's no question we've fought hard over the past 6 months. We have a battle on our hands, and we've been fighting on behalf of our fellow Michiganders. And the sacrifices that we've made have paid off, but we still need more support from the federal government. I've continued to call on the President, Mitch McConnell, and the U.S. Senate to pass a bipartisan recovery package that gives support for our families, our businesses, and the heroes on the front lines of this crisis. We need partnership and leadership at the federal level if we're going to get through this in as strong a manner as we can. States like Michigan are counting on this crucial funding that'll help us continue to provide essential services for our families. And small businesses are counting on federal leadership to get back on their feet. And I'll continue to work across the aisle with everyone who shares this goal. I am proud of what we have accomplished together throughout the crisis. There's no question we are not out of the woods yet. So to everyone who's watching now, please make sure you go out and get a flu shot. Wear your mask when you leave the house. Be smart, be strong, just like Michiganders are all across our great state. We will get through this together, and we must continue working together to beat this virus and strengthen our economy. Thank you.
Thanks, Governor. Couple of questions, I guess, to start it off. Take us from March to today, where you think I get asked all the time, where do you think we're at with the COVID? And you've got all the information at your hands. Where do you think we're at?
Well, I appreciate the question. And I know anyone who has studied what happened in 1918 with the flu influenza pandemic knows that it took 3 years for our country to get back to quote unquote normal. Now, I don't think that it's going to take that long for us now. We've made incredible advances, and we see how quickly so many different firms are moving toward a vaccine. Which would be made here in Michigan if Pfizer gets a vaccine approved that they can mass distribute. It'd be a great thing for our state, but most importantly, be a great thing for people all around the globe. We're still, I hate to say it, in the relatively early phases. This remains a novel virus. We're learning an incredible amount about COVID-19 every day, every week. You think about where we were in March when we didn't appreciate how critical simply masking up would be in terms of keeping people safe. And so you just think about the advances that we've made. In Michigan, we were hit hard early on, and that's why we got aggressive. A lot of the work that we did, it really was a great sacrifice on behalf of people all across our state. We've lost over 6,000 people to COVID-19, so it's been hard, but we know what to do. We've shown that we are capable of doing it to keep ourselves safe, and our economy has largely rebounded, and that's precisely why I think we've got to continue to follow the science. We've got to continue to learn as much as we can about this epidemic, but I do think that until there are approved vaccines that are safe, that can be mass manufactured and distributed, we're going to have to continue to be smart, follow the science, and take precautions. And so I would like to tell you precisely where I think we are. Are we 50% of the way? Are we 33? Are we 70? I can't put a number on it because a lot of it depends on how quickly this vaccine creation happens and distribution. But we're a lot smarter than we were 6 months ago, and we're getting stronger because of it.
It's great. I guess the set of the follow-up question is, I also get asked about a second wave and how prepared we are going into that if it happens. I mean, it's a big question, but if how prepared are we for a second wave?
I think one of the most sobering moments throughout this crisis, and there have been a number of them, was a phone call that I was a part of. The nation's governors were on the phone with the White House. And at that point in time in April, we were seeing our hospitals getting to critical mass. We were running out of PPE, and the message was sent to the nation's governors essentially that we had to obtain these things on our own. And I think that moment was sobering because we realized we needed to create a global procurement office in our state emergency operations center. And so it really was all hands on deck. And that's why I'm just working with Michigan firms to create PPE as we were trying to contract around the world to find the N95 mask for our nurses and doctors. And we're in a much stronger position going into what will likely be a second wave. If you've studied pandemics, you know that there will be a second wave. The question is, how intense will it be? How long will it last for? We know the tools we need to keep ourselves safe and to keep a second wave from overwhelming us. It all comes down to what we do individually, what we do as a collective state. Will we continue to come together? And we're a lot stronger going into a second wave. We've learned a lot about this virus. We've built up our PPE stores. We've built up relationships with partnerships like Ford and FEMA around the donation of masks, Dow Chemical creating hand sanitizer. Our hospitals are in a stronger position going into it. If we get inoculated with a flu vaccine, that'll be fewer people in the hospital. That'll help us when we see a resurgence of COVID. But as the temperature starts to drop and we go inside, it's really important we all continue to keep our guard up, because that's how COVID spreads. When we're close in contact and we're inside, is more dangerous inherently.
One of the things that you've sort of led the way on, and maybe if you can comment on this too, is it's been extraordinary, I think, the work that you and other governors have done together, both Republicans and Democrats. And maybe you want to speak to that just a little bit for people watching this today.
Yeah, no, I'd love to. I think that it's something for which I'm incredibly grateful that I've got relationships with governors across the country on both sides of the aisle. It was a piece of advice that all of my predecessors gave me coming in, that get to know your fellow governors. There are few people who are balancing all of the same kind of questions and pressures that I am. And so I have reached out and I've worked very closely with people like Mike DeWine, Republican from Ohio, or JB Pritzker, Democrat from Illinois. I know that it's helped give me a lot of information as I've made tough decisions every step of the way. When I decided it was time to get our kids out of school in those early days, the first phone call I got was from JB Pritzker, wanting to understand, how did you make the decision? What are you looking at? What do you know? What are you concerned about? When JB and Mike DeWine at the same time, not in concert though, closed their bars and made their restaurants dine out only, I called and each of them separately and asked those same questions. We get the benefit of one another's experts. And while Mike DeWine might not, tell people in Ohio that he's listening to public health experts at the University of Michigan, when he calls me, he gets the benefit of that, and we get the benefit of the Cleveland Clinic. And so it's sharing of information in this novel moment is so important to making decisions that impact people's lives and livelihoods.
That's awesome. Let's talk a little bit about racial disparities. We've been involved with Blue Cross at least a half a dozen years in the issue, and up until the COVID hit, unfortunately, nobody, when you discussed racial disparities, which have been going on forever, honestly, in healthcare, nobody paid much attention to it. But it's pretty clear, the data that we're seeing during the COVID, that if you're a person of color, you're 4 times more likely to die from COVID or to get COVID, which is really ridiculous. But you sort of led the way here between your Black Leadership Advisory Council to really deal with the issue of unconscious bias, which exists. There's no doubt about it. Why don't you talk about that a little bit for us?
Well, I think that it's really important moment for us to recognize that when there really are empowered seats at the table and there's real diversity in government, we make better decisions. I have to give a lot of credit to Dr. Janae Caldoun. She is our chief medical executive, African American emergency room doc, who was looking at the early numbers and said, we've got a racial disparity here and we've got to educate the public on it. Michigan was one of the first 3 states in the nation to start sharing demographic data. And we worked to have an outreach specifically to communities of color because they have been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. This disease has held up a mirror to the United States and reminded us of the very real health disparities that Black Americans face every day. So we created the task force on racial disparities, chaired by Garland Gilchrist, and on which Dr. Caldoun sat as well. The task force came up with a number of recommendations around outreach, around expansion of access to healthcare, around education and implicit bias training. But we also created the Black Leadership Advisory Council, which will work on an agenda that goes well beyond COVID-19. And I think that we should be proud as a state that we recognize a problem and we take action to solve it. Early on, we know that with 14% of our population being African American, 40% of the deaths were African American. Now that number is very close to being equitable, and those are strides that we've made because we recognize the problem. We worked to do outreach and to address it, and I'm proud of the work that we've done. But it's one step in a much longer journey.
Right, right, and it's very important. We've got a pretty diverse workforce here at Blue Cross, and I think I'm hearing from the workforce almost every day about the fact we actually are taking this serious, and there are things we can do. We can really make a difference in this space. There's no doubt about it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's turn to education. Today was my grandson's first day at kindergarten. He got to meet the teacher, and now they go virtual for 2 weeks, and then they're going to sort of look at things. And it was an exciting day. And there's thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of families that are going through that with their kids and their grandkids this month. And it's a different world because of COVID. So why don't you talk a little bit about your look at education and how we deal with all of this?
Yeah, well, it's hard. The education of our kids. When we took kids out of school this past spring, it weighed incredibly heavily on me. 1.5 million kids in Michigan, half of whom get their meals at school because of free and reduced lunch programs. And this is something that has been, created a lot of hardship for working parents, for most importantly for our kids, but for our educators. And so having a plan to get back start getting education back up and rolling was really important. We have over 800 school districts in the state of Michigan. Each has its own challenges and own assets. And that's why we convened the group that was the task force that came together that was chaired by Tanya Allen to promulgate best practices depending on which phase a particular region is in. But ultimately, those decisions have to be made at the local level because of these unique challenges and assets that different districts have. This is no question going to be a challenge for working parents, for students, for our teachers, and everyone in the education environment. But it's really important that we recognize that, we give the additional supports that our students are going to need to be successful. There are no easy answers here. And as a parent of a high school senior and a college freshman, I can tell you the anxieties that they feel, and they're older and they've already coped with a lot. Are real. And I can't imagine how parents with younger kids are navigating it. And that's why we've got to give one another a little bit of grace and a lot of support as we're navigating this. And also acknowledge the incredible teachers and people in our schools who have been working all summer to try to get this right and do the best we can under these circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely. Teachers are frontline workers too. There's no doubt about it. Let's shift to the economy and we'll talk a little bit about how you've dealt with the reopening of businesses. And everybody's got an opinion. There's millions of them. And why don't you walk through your sort of the philosophy here? Again, everybody's got an opinion, but you've got the facts. So go ahead.
Okay. Well, first and foremost, let me say this. No one wants to re-engage every sector of the economy more than me. This has been hard on all of us. And I know that businesses have made incredible sacrifice. I know that there are some businesses that may not reopen, that will struggle to make it if they do. It's just, I lose sleep over that because I know that these are good, hardworking people who've built something over the course of their lifetime. But this global pandemic is the reality that we are confronting. And I will say that Dr. Birx was in town here last week, and she was incredibly complimentary of how we as a state have stepped up and taken this challenge head on, and how responsible we have been in understanding the science and working with the business community to ensure that we've got policies that'll keep people safe when we do reengage. I'm incredibly grateful for the work that the Economic Recovery Council did. The MERC, Jerry Anderson and Nancy Schlichting headed that up, but there were people from various sectors of business that helped inform a lot of the work that we have done. And I think because of it, we now know that even though we were one of the hardest hit states early on, we currently rank 40th in the 7-day average of new coronavirus cases per capita. And we're in the 40th percent in terms of positive tests and in coronavirus diagnostic tests. That's pretty amazing when you think that we're the 10th largest state in the nation. We took this seriously, and we're in a much stronger position than other states that didn't, like Florida and Texas, for instance. And CNN Business recently published a ranking of which states' economies are back on track, and Michigan is ranked number 7 in the nation. So these are things. This is an economist, but that was one of John McCain's chief economists. So our economy in Michigan is operating at about 80%, 87% of where it was in March. Our hard work and aggressive action is paying off. Michigan businesses are in a stronger position because of it. And I think that it's just another data point that says when you follow the science and you work with business to promulgate protocols that make sense and that'll keep workers and patrons safe alike, you get consumer confidence, and you build back in a way that is stronger than other states, and that's really where we are. We've got to continue to focus on the science. We've got to learn as much as we can about this disease, which we're learning more every single day. Our infrastructure around tracing and testing, we have built up over the course of the last few months. We're doing about 30,000 tests a day. We're one of the leaders in that space as well. And so we're going to continue to get smarter and stronger every step of the way and try to keep as much of our economy engaged as we can. And that's why if we want to continue to move forward, every one of us has to continue to do our part by masking up and encouraging others who listen to us to do so as well.
And it's interesting, we look at the metrics, and you just talked about those metrics. Those metrics on almost every level really back what has been going on here in Michigan for the last 6 months. You can't make the metrics up. The metrics are the metrics. People certainly have a right to have their opinion, but I think generally the vast majority, or certainly a good majority of the Michigan citizenry, believes that you're on the right track and we're doing the right thing. And I think that's great. And the metrics speak for themselves. That's all I can say. Let's move. We talked a little bit about it, the economy and those numbers of us being at 87% full almost. We moved the unemployment needle to some degree. What do you see over the next quarter or two with the economy here in Michigan?
We know that in the midst of a global pandemic, we don't want people having to worry about how they're going to put food on the table. We've taken some extraordinary measures to ensure that more people were eligible for unemployment. I signed a supplemental that put an extra $300 unemployment benefit, made it available to people who were without work. But we have seen more people enter the workforce. As I said, we are about 87% of our capacity of where we were in March, which means that we are in a much stronger position than a lot of other states. We want to keep people back at work, though. And so in order to do that, in order to ensure that we can keep the things open that we have opened and look to perhaps engage more sectors of our economy, it's really I sound like a broken record, I know, but it's essential that we wear our masks and we continue to understand this virus because it has not changed. It is still a very real threat. It is still present all across the state of Michigan. And that's why we've got to continue to take it very seriously, but re-engage in a way that we can continue to stay engaged.
Right. You mentioned executive powers, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the ballot proposal, or at least the proposal that's out there to sort of take away the executive powers that the governor's had since 1945. I'm a product, at least on the other side of the aisle, of John Engler back in the 90s, and John Engler, who was a strong governor, used these powers, and you're using it, I think, very nimbly for us to sort of navigate through this. So why don't you talk a little bit about that so people get a sort of a handle of what's going on here?
Sure. So I have had to do some extraordinary things, and each of them has weighed heavily. And if I could avoid taking actions like we've had to because they weren't necessary, I would much prefer that scenario. But we're in the midst of a global pandemic, and this is a virus that poses an incredible threat to our lives and our livelihoods. And so we took it seriously, and I issued a number of executive orders. The powers have been challenged in court. They've been upheld both at the district court and the Court of Appeals. We'll be going to the Supreme Court. We feel good that they will be likely upheld again. And yet, because of that, we now see an effort to take these powers away from the executive office. Now, I think it's really important to point out that these are authorities that we have conferred upon our chief executive in extraordinary circumstances to keep people safe. Each governor since 1945 has had these same powers, and I'm going to fight to make sure that every governor after me has these powers if, God forbid, they find themselves in a situation where they have to be used. The fact of the matter is we are in a stronger position than most other states in the nation because we got aggressive and took actions that were permitted under these 1945 powers. And so an effort to take those away jeopardizes all the work that we have done and also puts us in a much weaker position when we have a second wave, which we know, if you've studied a little bit about history and pandemics, knows that that's probably something that we're going to confront. And so declining to sign an effort to take these powers away is really important. This isn't about me. This is about making sure that we've got a governor who can take action to protect us when it's necessary. And I think that's really the crux of the issue. We've come a long ways. Let's not go back. Let's not jeopardize all the sacrifice that we've made. And let's make sure that a governor has authority to take action when it's necessary. We need a strong leader in these times, and we need to make sure that future leaders have these strong authorities.
Okay. Thanks for that update. Let's talk a little bit too. I think people are interested in the economy part of the state budget, because obviously the state budget's been hit very hard by COVID-19, and maybe you can give us an update.
Yeah, so our budget is due at the end of this month. We are continuing to negotiate with the legislature. It's been a challenge, of course, because as I said, the general fund hasn't increased in 20 years. And so the budget is always a question of priorities. I would submit that in this moment, when we've not seen the federal government step up and assist states, that it's really crucial we do everything we can to protect public safety, public health, and public education. And that's where the crux of the conversation is right now with the legislature. Every one of us, Republican and Democrat, are calling on the federal government to get this fourth supplemental done. We all recognize that our kids are going to need additional supports as we try to meet their educational needs, that we've got to make sure more people have health care coverage as we're still in the midst of a global pandemic. And in the midst of all of the righteous conversation around race, public safety is something that is an important part of what that general fund does as well. And that's why, as we are finalizing this current budget, it is my great hope that the feds step up and get their job done so that we are in a position to make greater investments in these critical areas.
Great, thank you. You talked a little earlier in the beginning in your address about small business relief, and obviously small business is the backbone of any economy and have been hit really hard by COVID. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so while businesses are reopening, there's no question that the impacts of COVID-19 are still creating a lot of difficult situations for small business across our state. From lost business to lost revenue to increased costs associated with keeping their employees and their customers safe. And that's why we worked with the legislature and I signed into law a bipartisan supplemental budget deal that directed $100 million of the federal CARES Act funding to the Michigan Strategic Fund so that we could implement the Michigan Small Business Restart Program. These are going to be grants of up to $20,000, and it'll help support our small business and nonprofits as they reopen. 30% of these funds will be identified for minority-owned, women-owned, and veteran-owned businesses. And when you couple that with the $5 billion announcement that Huntington Bank made for a 5-year commitment to the state of Michigan, I think that these are two important pieces of getting our small businesses back online and in a position where they can be successful. And that's a real priority for my administration and work that we're doing in concert with the various organizations that have small business interests at heart, including the chamber.
Great. Let's talk a little politics now. Obviously, we're less than 60 days away from the election, and it's on everybody's mind. You're the national co-chair of the Biden campaign. Give us your take. People, I'm sure, are very curious of what you're thinking and what you're going to be doing, and how you think this is all going to play out.
So, I mean, over the last 7 months, I will say our whole focus has been, navigating Michigan through COVID-19. And I think the crisis has really, for me, put a finer point on how important it is that we have leadership in Washington, D.C. that is creating a national strategy and supporting state efforts. As co-chair of the campaign, I do believe that Joe Biden is the leader that we need in the White House right now more than ever. I believe that they'll lead by example and they'll pay attention to the science and focus on the people that they serve and the businesses in Michigan, not ego or politics. I know that I think we've seen that the health of our people goes hand in hand with the strength of our economy, and having a plan to both address COVID-19 and to build our economy back better is crucial. And that's, I think, the dinner table issue that everyone's going to be focused on in 2020. We need to have the support of the federal government. We need a national strategy around masking and testing, and a national strategy around PPE as we go into the fall. And we also need the full-throated support of our National Guard, who we have utilized to do more testing across the state, everywhere from nursing homes to prisons. We're now nearing 200,000 lost American lives and deaths from COVID-19, millions unemployed. And so leadership that is going to be focused on the health crisis in combination with restoring our moral standing in the world and getting us back to work, I think, is what's most important. And I really believe that the Biden-Harris ticket is the one that can deliver on those fronts.
Great, thanks for that. It's one of the things we're going to highlight at Blue Cross over the next 60 days is to do two things: get a flu shot and vote. And I think if we all do that over the next 60 days, we will have made a pretty significant impact on America. So hopefully people can do that. So we got a few minutes left. This has been quite a journey over the last 6 months. I can't imagine, having been in and around politics, it has to have been just an unbelievable experience for you. There's no way you could prepare yourself for this, is there?
I don't think so. I'm fortunate that I've got other governors who've served Michigan that I can talk to, and I do take them up on it. I'm grateful that I've got colleagues, current governors, that I've been able to work closely with. I've seen some of the best in people in our state during these most trying times. In an ordinary moment, a global pandemic would take all of your energy, or a recession would take all of your energy, or a 500-year flooding event would take all your energy, or the righteous debate and conversation around, racial relationships in our society would take all of your energy. And yet we've got to pay attention and work through all of these crises and continue to run state government and fix the damn roads, which we're doing, by the way. So there's no handbook for this moment, but there are sources of inspiration everywhere. And when I went to Midland right after the flood, and I saw people coming together, a community in the midst of a pandemic, evacuating people, and doing so with such optimism and sense of community. That was one of the most inspirational days I've had over these last 6 months. And there are sources everywhere. You have to seek to find them some days, but they are there. And it's the people of the state that make the state so great.
That's great. Governor, thanks for your time today and your insight. Boy, there's a lot going on, and there's a lot to be done, and hopefully we'll continue to support you, the chamber and businesses and people. Let's do what we need to do, which is distance, wash our hands, wear masks. It's not that tough if we do it, and it can really make a difference. And thank you for your leadership. You've done a really, really great job. I'm proud that you're the governor of Michigan and my governor, and I'm sure I speak for thousands of people here in Michigan. And so thanks for joining us. Thanks to the attendees that are joining us via this MPC20 Conversations. It was a great conversation, and we look forward to many more. Thank you very much.
The Detroit Regional Chamber's MPC20 Conversations Respond and Rebuild digital series is provided in partnership with Detroit Public Television and presented by Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan, with additional support from Accenture, Bank of America, Barton Mallow, Comerica Bank, Consumers Energy, Delta Dental, Dow, DTE Energy, Enbridge Energy, Ford Motor Company, Huntington Bank, ITC, KPMG, the Kresge Foundation, Kroger, Michigan Economic Development Corporation, PNC Bank, Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation, Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans, the Skillman Foundation, and TCF Bank. And by these supporters: support for Detroit Public TV's coverage is provided by DTE Energy Foundation and Masco.